Before we begin, I wanted to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons. You guys keep me going, and you guys are awesome. Thank you guys so much. If you happen to like this video, please consider clicking the like button or hitting the subscribe button. It really helps the channel out, and it helps me motivate me to make more videos like it. So thank you guys for watching, and thank you guys for clicking the like and subscribe button. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I am your Innkeeper, and today we'll be discussing the subclasses for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Today's video will focus on the fighter subclasses. This video series is my first impressions on the subclasses for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. My thoughts on these subclasses might change with time, so we'll see. The first subclass that we're going to focus on today is called the Psi Warrior. The first ability that you get when you choose this subclass at 3rd level is called Psionic Power. This is an interesting ability. It gives you a little bit more versatility and a lot more options that are greatly needed in the fighter class. Not only do you get some interesting new abilities, but you also get a new resource to track that's called the Psionic Dice. So before we go into each ability, you gain some abilities at 3rd level, and then in later levels you get a few more options that you can use your Psionic Dice for. The Psionic abilities are something that it kind of implies are unlimited use unless they require a Psionic die. If they require a Psionic die, then you can't use it if you don't have any Psionic dice left. So it's weird the way that they phrase it, because I think most of the abilities are going to require Psionic dice, especially the 3rd level ones. I think all of them require Psionic dice. But just something to note here. I do like the options of being able to use a resource for different abilities, and you can use one more than the others, or if you happen to need all of them, then you can diversify and use them all. So I like the idea of having more options for tactical benefits in combat. So the Psionic dice do scale, which is really nice because not all the subclasses in Tasha's have the scaling that we expect from these subclasses. So it's nice that this one gets it. So let's take a look at some of the Psionic abilities here. The first one is called Protective Field. This one is interesting. You can use your reaction to reduce damage from yourself or an ally. This reminds me of the Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, which is really, really cool. I like abilities like this. It's nice that you're not just focusing on dealing damage. It's nice that you can also help your party members. So I like things like this. Frontline fighters generally don't have too many abilities that help protect their allies, so it's nice that you get this. And abilities like this are really, really fun to play, I think. The only thing is, at higher levels, this one doesn't keep up as well with the scaling, so that's one drawback to this one. But it's still nice to have in case of an emergency. At lower levels, though, it's pretty impactful, so it's nice. The next ability is called Psionic Strike. So once per round, you can do extra damage by spending Psionic die. And pretty straightforward. I mean, it's good. It's a little bit boring. You just deal extra damage, unless you go out of your way to describe the ability and how it works when you use it. Then I think this one can be kind of boring. Now, I like that you can use it for ranged attacks. You can use it for up to 30 feet away, which makes it pretty handy. It would be nice if you can use it more than once per round. And I get that it could be overpowered, but you do have a limited resource. So it reminds me of the Paladin Smite. You have a limited resource. Yeah, it can be extremely impactful, but you can pretty much blow up for a round or a couple of rounds and then be done with it. But unfortunately, they decided to limit this and just make it usable once per round. So there it is. The final ability you get at 3rd level is called Telekinetic Movement. You can move an object or creature within 30 feet, up to 30 feet away. And if it's tiny, you can move it to your hand. So interesting, because it's pretty strategically advantageous. If, say, an ally happened to disarm someone, then you can move their weapon into, away from their reach. Or if you want to move an enemy or an ally to a more strategically impactful location during combat, it's nice that you can move an ally or an enemy. It's nice. I like this ability. The only drawback that I think it has is that it takes an action. So, honestly, as a fighter, you're probably not going to be wasting an action just to move something. especially at higher levels. When you reach 3 attacks per round, you're going to give up 3 attacks just to be able to move something. It's probably not going to happen. Let's be honest here. It's, I wish it were a bonus action, and I get that it might be too strong if it were a bonus action, but maybe some kind of trade-off would have been nice here. The fact that it takes an action means that you're probably not going to use this in combat as often as you think. Now, at least it does have some out-of-combat utility, which is nice, and at least you'll take advantage of it then. But in combat, I think on paper it looks more attractive than it actually is. So then at 7th level, you get the Telekinetic Adept ability. So you get a few new abilities that you can use your psionic dice for. The first one is called Psi Powered Leap. You can fly, double your movement speed until the end of your turn. Takes a bonus action to use, and you can spend the die to be able to use it again, or you can just have it recharge after a short rest. From a mechanical standpoint, I really love this ability. Fighters don't get a lot of maneuverability or movement abilities, especially flight. Flight is something that is a big Achilles heel for fighters, and the fact that you can get to fly, even if it's just for one round, is great. Now, thematically, I'm not a fan of it, and I understand that there are people that play this game that play a lot of video games, or they watch anime, or read comic books, and this, for me, it feels like a very comic book or anime type of ability, or video gaming ability. Cool if you're into that, and that's, the feel of your game. It's just not for me. I don't like this kind of thing. And I understand what some people are going to say. Well, wizards can cast fly. But for me, that's a little bit different. When a wizard is actually casting a spell, it has a different feel for me than someone who can just take a big jump. I don't know. Thematically, it doesn't work for me. Anyways, the next ability is called Telekinetic Thrust. So if you use your special die to deal extra damage with the Psionic Strike, you can knock the creature prone or move them back if they fail strength saving throw. So this could be a little bit of a nice battlefield control ability. I don't like that it's tied to the Psionic Strike, because you may not want to do that to that particular target. If you're dealing extra damage, that means you're probably trying to kill this target, not get it away from you. I mean, maybe you are, but how many times did you want to deal extra damage and also not want to kill it, but move it away instead and get away from it? Probably not a whole lot of times, I think. So I feel like this one's a little bit situational, but once in a while I could see it coming in handy. Then at 10th level, you get the Guarded Mind ability. This one gets you resistance to psychic damage, which is fine. But psychic is not really a damage type that you encounter very often, so you're not going to see this as much as one might think. But luckily, you do get another ability with this, and this one's very good. So when you get the Charmed or Fear effect put on you at the start of your turn, you can spend a psionic die, and then whatever effect is causing this. So what's interesting is the wording here. It doesn't specifically say it ends the fear or charm effect. It says it ends the effect that causes it. So something to keep in mind, if you've already been struck by something that caused fear and they're not concentrating, you've got the fear effect on you, but let's say there's some magical trinket sitting there and it's pulsating a fear effect on everybody, you can end the effect from that device, but you won't necessarily be ending that fear effect. Something that may not come up very often, but something to keep in mind, because that is how it's worded. Now, most effects, when you end them, they will also end at how it affects you. So to be fair, this probably will end the fear or charm effect on you, but it's interesting that they worded it that way. I do like that you don't have to roll or anything like that. You just spend a die and it's gone. I like that. It's pretty strong. These conditions, especially fear, is something that as a frontline combatant, you seem to encounter a lot, and it really affects your impact in combat. And I'm glad that they added these kinds of abilities to a few subclasses in Tasha's, because it really helps people who play frontline fighters be able to be a little bit more consistent with their hits and damage dealing. And then at 15th level, you get an ability called Bulwark of Force. So you can use a bonus action to gain the benefits of half cover for you and several allies within 30 feet. It lasts for a minute. It's a pretty good duration. Half cover is decent, and it provides a +2 to AC and dexterity saving throws. So this one you can use once per short rest, or you can spend a die if you want to use it again. Overall, I think it's okay. It's not going to turn the tide of combat, that's for sure. But a bonus is a bonus, so, I'll take it. Your capstone then is called Telekinetic Master. You get this one at 18th level. You can cast a telekinesis spell once per long rest, or if you spend a die, you can cast it again. So you can, when you're using or concentrating on the telekinesis spell, you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action while you're doing that. That's pretty interesting. This one's really good. Telekinesis is a very good spell. There's a lot of great things that you can do with it in and out of combat, so I like that. Overall, I think it's good. It's an 18th level ability, so you're probably never going to see it. Take a drink. So to summarize on the Psi Warrior, I've heard some people comparing the subclass and its mechanics to the Battle Master. I can understand where they're coming from in regards to having like a pool of dice that you can use for different abilities, but that's where the similarities end. The purpose of the Battle Master is to be more efficient in combat and doing some maneuvers within combat, mostly dealing extra damage or a little bit of defense and maneuverability. But the Psi Warrior, I think, is more of a utility in addition to doing some damage in combat. So you give up a little bit of that capability of tactics and combat for a little bit more utility in and out of combat. So a little bit of a different take here. I don't think it's a fair comparison to compare it to the Battle Master. But hey, so overall, this subclass does have a good mix of abilities. I really like the option to be able to spend a die to get another use of those like once per day abilities. That's pretty cool that you have those options to spend a resource and get an ability that you've already used for the day. I like that. Other than a few minor annoyances, I think this subclass is very good in terms of mechanics. I'm not a fan of the thematic feel at all. It's way too comic book or anime or Jedi, whatever people want to call it. But that's just a matter of preference. And if you like that kind of theme, then more power to you. Go ahead and enjoy the subclass. It's great mechanically. Is it better than the Battle Master? I think it's different enough that you can't really necessarily compare them because they'll have different uses within a group. So the Psi Warrior, as I mentioned before, is a little bit more utility than the Battle Master. But other than that, I think it's a pretty solid fighter subclass. The final subclass that we'll be discussing today is called the Rune Knight. So this one at 3rd level, you get a few bonus proficiencies. You get Smith's Tools. You get to speak the Giant language as a bonus language. It's nice to have. It's mostly flavor, but at times it can be handy. It's very situational, but it can be handy. But at 3rd level, you also get a feature called the Rune Carver. You learn 2 runes, and you can learn more as you level, and you max out at 5 when you reach level 15. So you can touch an object, like a weapon or armor, and inscribe one of the runes that you know on it, and it lasts to your next long rest. It's too bad that you can't use one rune on one item and then the same rune on another item. That would be really awesome. But you do get to do that later on, so we'll get to that. So let's talk about the runes that you get at 3rd level. The Cloud Rune gives you advantage on sleight of hand and deception checks. You also get a special reaction ability that you can use once per short rest. It reminds me of the Enchanter Wizard, but this one doesn't require a saving throw from the attacker, so that's really cool. It automatically just, boom, succeeds. The best part is that you can choose a new target that's up to 30 feet away, even if the attack was a melee attack that wouldn't reach that person. So if someone's attacking you and there's another creature 20 feet from you, that attack, you can still have it hit that creature that's 20 feet away, even though it was a melee attack and shouldn't be able to reach that. So this one is a really, really good rune overall. The next one is called the Fire Rune. You can double your proficiency bonus when using a tool required for that proficiency. So basically you get expertise in tools that you're already proficient with. That's all right. You also get another effect. This one allows you to do an extra 2d6 fire damage on an attack and possibly restrain the creature if you hit it and they fail a saving throw. It definitely can come in handy. You can use it once per short rest. I really like this. It gives you a few tactical advantages and some really nice damage, especially at the lower levels. It doesn't scale very well, so this one becomes less good at higher levels. But luckily, you can switch out runes when you level. So you want to keep this one at lower levels and then eventually switch it out, because at higher levels, this one's not going to be as good as some of the other ones. Next up is the Frost rune. This one gives you advantage on animal handling and intimidation checks. You basically get a bonus action that gets you a +2 to strength and constitution saving throws and ability checks for 10 minutes. Clearly, this is meant to be an out-of-combat utility thing. Usually, if you're in harsh environments, you're going to be making a lot of constitution saves or having to move boulders and that kind of thing. So it's nice that you can get yourself a little bit of a boost there. It's a little bit situational, probably the most situational of the runes that you get at 3rd level. The thing is, the biggest impact from this rune is going to be at the lower levels, but that's when your choices are limited. So I do have an issue with this one. You only get 2 runes when you choose the subclass at 3rd level. So are you going to pick this one and then just one other one that you're going to use regularly, and then this one that's super situational? Or are you going to pick 2 runes that you're going to use consistently? I think that you're going to pick the ones that you're going to use more consistently and not the situational ones, even though this one is going to help you more at lower levels than at higher levels. When you get to higher levels and you get to pick more and more runes that you might want to actually pack this one because you'll have the space for it, but at higher levels, it's not going to be as impactful. So it's kind of a catch-22 with this one. I don't know. I don't think that's a good one. And then the final one that you get at 3rd level is called the Stone Rune. This one, you get advantage on insight checks, and you have 120-foot dark vision when you're holding the item that you infuse with the runes. That's really good, especially if your class or if your race tends to not have dark vision. Then it's great to get additional dark vision. But even if you do have dark vision, probably it's going to be 60 feet. This will extend it to 120 feet, so that's handy. And then once per short rest, if a creature ends its turn within 30 feet, you can incapacitate them and reduce their speed to 0 for a minute. They get to save every round, but the fact that it uses your reaction is really good. You guys by now probably know I love abilities that give you options for your reaction other than wizards, because most classes don't have a lot to do with their reaction. So if you get an additional way to use your reaction, that's adding to your action economy, which is fantastic. It's the only thing that I don't like about this one is it's considered a charm. So many creatures are immune to charm that I think that you may encounter that a lot of the time you won't be able to use this on them. But I still think that you can benefit from this, especially at the lower levels where you don't have a lot of creatures that are immune to charm. So it's a really good use for your reaction, a really good ability. I like it. At 3rd level, you also get the Giant's Might ability. So you can use a bonus action to get certain benefits for a minute. And you can do this a few times per day. It's based on your proficiency bonus. Your size goes to large. You have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. And you can deal an extra d6 damage on one weapon attack every single round. This is helpful both in and out of combat. The extra damage is really good, especially at 3rd level. It doesn't scale very well, unfortunately. It just goes up to like a d8 at 10th level, which is not great. It's actually really funny in a bad way. Alright, so at 7th level, you get the Runic Shield feature. When a creature is hit by an attack, you can use your reaction and force the attacker to reroll. So you get to use this a few times per day, and again, it's another great use for your reaction. So you know how I feel about those. Automatically, it goes to a pretty good if it takes advantage of your reaction. So I like that. The best part about this ability is that you can use it after the attack hits, so it's never really wasted. And of course, the new roll might still allow the attack to hit, but it can really give your ally a chance to avoid damage from an attack altogether, which is better than damage reduction. So I like that. I like that ability. And then also at 7th level, you get a few more runic options for your rune ability. So the Hill rune gives you advantage on saving throws versus poison, and you have resistance to poison damage. Poison is a common damage type from level 1 through level 20, so that's really nice. Very, very good. Plus, once per short rest, you get resistance to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage for a minute. I really, really like this. It's kind of like getting a Barbarian Rage ability on a fighter. the most common damage types in the game are slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning. So this ability is going to be helpful all the way through level 20. The next one is called the Storm Rune. This one gives you advantage on Arcana checks, and you can't be surprised as long as you aren't incapacitated. Not being surprised is interesting. A surprise doesn't really happen very often unless your DM is pretty evil. So you're not going to really get to use this as much as you think. But being surprised can really change the outcome of a combat. It can really turn the tide one way or the other. So if you are not able to be surprised, that can be a huge impact when it does come into effect. So even though you're probably rarely going to see this, when it does come into effect, you're going to be really glad that you had it. And then on top of that, once per long rest, as a reaction, when you or another creature within 60 feet makes an attack roll, a saving throw, or an ability check, you can have the roll get advantage or disadvantage. This one is really, really good. So getting another use of your reaction, it's really, really adding to your repertoire of things that you can do with your reaction. I really like that. And impacting a major roll without granting anyone a saving throw for that to happen is amazing. So I really, really like that. At 10th level, you get an ability called Great Stature. So you permanently grow in height. This one's kind of funny, especially for small races like halflings and gnomes. Then, you grow like a foot. It's pretty awesome. It's mostly flavor, but I like it. It's kind of funny. Also, the extra damage that you deal with your Giant's Might feature goes from 1d6 to 1d8. So literally you gain one more point of damage at 10th level for an ability that can be used once per round. Come on, guys. The Rune Knight was really shaping up to be an amazing subclass full of non-stop great abilities until this one comes into effect. I mean, it's laughably bad. Adding one extra point of damage once per round, you're not even going to notice it. So it's pretty terrible, let's be honest. Then at 15th level, you become the Master of Runes. You can now use a specific rune up to 2 times instead of just once. That's what I was saying earlier. I wish that you could do that. Well, at 15th level, you can. Too bad it comes in so late in the game, but hey, at least they give it to you at some point. And all of your runes recover after a short rest. So it's a great ability. I wish that higher level abilities for other subclasses were more like this, where they impact your existing abilities. They synergize really nice. I like it. And then your capstone is called Runic Juggernaut. And your damage from Giant's Might goes up to 1d10. Ooh. And your reach increases by 5 feet. You also become huge if you want. You don't have to. It's not the best capstone, but, I always say you're never really going to see this. Very rarely, at least. Take a drink. And so, whatever. It's not a great ability. It kind of sucks. But whatever. You're probably never going to see it. So overall, the Rune Knight is both mechanically and thematically great. I wish the runes weren't necessarily tied to just giants. I wish the lore was a little bit more broad for the Rune Knight, because there are other cultures and stuff that use runes and things like that, and it would be nice to not necessarily have it tied to knights, or not to knights, to giants. But it is what it is, whatever. The abilities are really interesting. They provide a lot of options for in and out of combat use. I also really like there's several ways for them to use their reaction, which is a great use of action economy. Of all the melee type subclasses, this one probably has the most options for using your reaction, which is fantastic. Automatically that knocks it up a notch. And because the fighter doesn't have a whole lot to do with the reaction, that means that all these abilities are additional things that you can do every round that are actually really impactful and can help your game. So to summarize, the Psi Knight is very different for fighters. It's a good mix of combat and utility features. The abilities are mostly good to great, and the subclass stands out as very unique. Thematically, I really don't care for it. It doesn't speak to me at all. But whatever, if it's for you thematically, if that's the type of game that you like, then you'll really like the subclass, because mechanically it really, really is great from beginning to end. The Rune Knight, on the other hand, it does speak to me for D&D and fantasy tropes. Even though the giant theme is something I wish wasn't front and center, It's still in line with what I imagined for the fantasy setting, so I like this one a little bit more thematically. The abilities are mechanically great, except for the level 10 ability. And the fact that you get options to customize your Rune Knight makes it even better, so that 2 Rune Knights that are going in the same party can still be quite different from each other, which is also really nice to have. Mechanically, both fighter classes are absolute standouts. So let's go ahead and rank them. And just a quick note on my rankings. When I rank a subclass, I rank it based on comparing it to other subclasses within the same class. I don't compare it to subclasses from other classes because different classes have different roles within the party. So comparing to other fighter subclasses, I think that with this one, there are none in the bottom tier. For mid-tier, there are also none. And Tasha's Cauldron of Everything comes through for the fighter because both the Psi Warrior and the Rune Knight end up being top tier in my book. So those are my first impressions of the fighter subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I do hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider clicking the like button. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down there in the comments down below. As always, I am your Innkeeper, and this is the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then. And the final subclass that we're going to be talking about today is called the Rune Knight. Jesus Christ, man. So I like abilities like this. It reminds me of like the ancient Guardian. I like abilities like this. It reminds me of the Barbarian subclass, the Ancients, the Path of the Ancients, or Ancient Guardians. Ancestral Guardian. God damn it, Vase.